There are rivers that simply flow, winding through valleys, cities, time. And then there are rivers that remember, rivers that speak. The kind that don't just carry water but stories. Heavy, half-forgotten stories that cling to the mud like old bones. The Yarra River, or Birrarung as the Wurundjeri once called it, doesn't roar like the great rivers of the north, nor does it dazzle with crystalline waters. It broods. It coils through Melbourne like a silent witness, carrying the weight of what was here before, and what still is. You wouldn't think a monster would lurk here, amid the ferries and bridges and high-rise towers. But that's exactly where it waits. In the seams of the modern world, in the places where the past has never quite let go. They call it the Yarra-Yarra. But that name, like much in this city, is a misunderstanding. An echo of something deeper, older. The real name has been swallowed by time, spoken only in hushed tones around sacred fires, in a language the wind still remembers, but few now speak. To the settlers, Yarra-Yarra meant the river's endless flow, but to those who came before, it meant something else, something with eyes that shine in the dark, something that stirs when balance is broken. Before the trams and towers, before the grid of streets stamped its will onto the land, the river was a living thing. The Wurundjeri people knew it not as scenery but as kin. The Birrarung was a place of gathering, of ceremony, of survival. Its currents were stories in motion, its still pools, reflections of the dreaming. In that ancient cosmology, nothing was mere landscape. The earth, the sky, the water, they were formed by beings of immense power, creatures who moved across the land in a time that is not just past, but parallel. One such being was Bunjil, the great eagle, creator and protector. But not all dreaming spirits soared above. Some slithered below. Some guarded the places no man dared to disturb. Among them was the river guardian, never fully named, never fully known, not malevolent, not benign, just present, a force of reckoning. It would sleep for centuries, they said, curled in the deepest bends of the riverbed, until something disturbed the equilibrium. Then it would rise, not in fury but in necessity, a ripple in the stillness, a warning in the dark. When John Batman and his men came in 1835, carving Melbourne from the bush and rerouting the river's veins, something changed. The Birrarung was diverted, dredged, dammed, its ancient rhythms disrupted. And with that disruption came the first whispers. A shadow beneath a fishing boat, a cry in the fog, a chill that didn't belong to the wind. Thomas Grimes was the first to write it down. 1840, somewhere near what's now Prince's Bridge. His journal, found years later, speaks of a serpentine form, deliberate and strange, moving beneath his skiff at dusk. Not a fish, not a log, but something watching, something aware. He described the water as alive with presence, as if the river had eyes. By 1858, the Melbourne Argus was reporting similar tales, brief, easily dismissed. Dock workers claiming to see a creature prehistoric in size and shape rise near Queen's Bridge. The story was buried beneath headlines of politics and trade, chalked up to drunken nonsense. But it wasn't the last. As Melbourne's streets hardened and its buildings grew, the river was pushed further into the background. Yet the sightings continued, always on the edges of the map in places where nature still held sway. A laundress near Abbotsford, 1890, claimed she saw eyes like coals, watching her from the water's edge. Her words, recorded by a local priest, tremble with fear even now. "It knew me," she wrote. "It saw inside me." By the turn of the century, the legend had grown. Remnant bush along the Yarra's bends became places of whispered dares. "Swim there," kids would say, pointing at the murky water, "and see if the Yarra-Yarra finds you." Most never did. A few never returned, and those who came back, well, they never spoke of what they saw. By 1923, the stories were no longer confined to whispered warnings. A group of early morning rowers, hardened blokes who knew the river like the lines of their palms, were training near Richmond when they felt something pass beneath them, something vast, unseen, but unmistakably real. Their boats rocked with a sudden swell that came from nowhere, a single undulation that rippled outward, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. They spoke of a shape just beneath the surface, long and ridged, moving upstream with the strength of the current against it. They returned to shore pale and shaken, their voices tight with disbelief. One of them, a man named Bill Rawlins, gave an interview to a small paper. "Wasn't no fish, I tell you," he said. "Whatever it was, it made the water feel wrong, like it didn't want us there." The article was printed, retracted, forgotten. But Bill never wrote again. Years passed. The city sprawled outward, eating into the bushland, replacing reeds with concrete and frog song with traffic. The river adapted. It always does. But sometimes when the rain falls heavy and the current runs high, the old rhythm returns, briefly, like a dream glimpsed through smoke. And when it does, the stories rise again. In 1977, a photographer named Maureen Delaney was up before dawn, camera slung over her shoulder, trying to capture the Yarra in silhouette against the waking sky. She was standing on a footbridge near the Royal Botanic Gardens when she saw it, something long and low breaking the surface, gliding soundlessly across the current. She raised her camera instinctively, fired a frame. The photo is grainy, the light's all wrong. You'd think it was a fallen branch, maybe a patch of rubbish drifting in from upriver, but there's a curve to it, a bend that feels too intentional. The water ripples in a clean, narrow V behind it, unbroken by wind or wake. Maureen swore she saw it turn. "It moved with purpose," she said in an interview years later. "It knew I was there." Some called it a hoax, others a misidentification, but Maureen kept the original negative, untouched, until the day she died. Left it in a tin box marked truth, buried beneath other relics, love letters, dried flowers, an old Wurundjeri pendant given to her by a friend long gone. Then came the rains of '98. The Yarra swelled with stormwater, rushing fast and high past the towers of Southbank. A security guard on the night shift, just a kid really, was having a smoke by the edge of the promenade when he noticed the water part. Not dramatically, not like in films, but subtly, like something large was moving just beneath the surface, pushing aside the river with quiet insistence. He dropped his cigarette, didn't finish his shift, never returned, and still the river flows. The most talked about sighting came in 2013. 3 university students filming a short doco on urban waterways were paddling near the docklands when their camera, mounted on the bow, caught it, just for a moment. 18 seconds of blurred movement, a dark mass slicing through the water, leaving behind a wake too perfect, too clean for any fish or debris. They uploaded the footage. It went viral within hours. Some viewers claimed it was a prank, others, a misunderstood seal. A few experts weighed in, suggesting large eels or carp, but none could fully explain the way the creature moved. Too fluid, too precise. "It's not just the shape," said one marine biologist. "It's the behavior. It behaves like a predator, like something aware of being watched. And that's the heart of the matter. It's not just what people see. It's what they feel. That low hum in the bones, the prickle on the back of the neck, the sense that something ancient is awake beneath the surface. Not evil, not kind, just watching. Because the Yarra isn't just a river. Not really. It's a membrane, a thin veil between the known and the unknown, stretched taut across centuries of disruption and denial. Beneath it swims memory, myth, and maybe more. They say every myth has a source. Some flicker to life from fear, others from fragments of forgotten truth. And then there are those that are seated deep in the marrow of a place. Stories that don't so much start as emerge, like mist from water, rising unbidden and ancient. To understand the Yarra-Yarra, you have to step out of the city's noise and lean into what came before. You have to hear the river as the Wurundjeri heard it. Not as background, but as voice. They called it Birrarung, river of mists. But that word carried more than description. It carried breath, ancestry, law. The river was not a feature of the land. It was kin. In their cosmology, the dreaming is not a thing of the past. It pulses beside the present, hidden in plain sight. Beings from that realm don't fade. They wait, watch, intervene when needed. And for the Wurundjeri, the river held one such being. A guardian not born of malice but of balance. A reminder that everything taken must one day be returned. This guardian, never quite named, never quite described the same way twice, is at the root of the Yarra-Yarra legend. For some, it's an enormous eel, long as a tram and black as night, its mouth ringed with teeth and its eyes glowing like coals. For others, it's something closer to a crocodile, but older, stranger, draped in algae and silence. Always, it's said to emerge only when the river is harmed. That's the thread that binds the sightings, the moments of disruption, colonization, industry, pollution. Every time the river is twisted from its course, the creature stirs, not to attack, not to reclaim, simply to appear, a manifestation of resistance, of reckoning, a reminder that the dreaming hasn't left us. It's only ever been submerged. There are those who dismiss this as romanticism, as metaphor run wild. But what is metaphor if not truth in a form we can handle? A myth, after all, is just history that's too raw to wear its own face. Scientists have tried to ground the legend. They've pointed to the Australian longfin eel, Anguilla reinhardti, a species known to migrate thousands of kilometers to spawn in the Coral Sea. Some have reached lengths beyond a meter. A particularly large one, glimpsed in low light, could easily become monstrous in memory. But that doesn't explain the intelligence, the pattern of sightings following human damage. Nor does it explain the eyes. Others suggest rogue crocodiles, escaped pets set loose when they grew too large. It's happened before, in Queensland, in the Territory. But here in Victoria, where winter's bite turns the water to near ice, a salty wouldn't last long. Still, there are gaps. And in those gaps, anything is possible. Even natural phenomena have been offered. Floating debris, submerged logs, river eddies playing tricks. The Yarra, with its sediment-thick flow and narrow visibility, creates perfect illusions. But illusions don't make eye contact. They don't inspire dread. They don't move against the current. And then there's the psychological theory, that the Yarra-Yarra is a collective memory, a cultural echo of colonization's violence. The river was taken, twisted, its sacredness ignored. And in response, the mind of the city conjured a beast to haunt its edges, a projection of guilt, of what was lost, of what still waits beneath. But even that feels too neat, too clean, because whatever swims in the Yarra doesn't feel like guilt. It feels alert, independent, not a ghost but a presence. You can feel it most on still nights when the wind dies and the city's hum fades to a low pulse. Walk alone along the banks then, and the river changes. It breathes. You might not see anything. Most don't. But every now and then the water will shift subtly as if something massive just dipped below, and the air will tighten. Your skin will remember something your mind forgot, something old, something sacred. The city tries to forget, of course. That's what cities do best. They build over the old things, drown the old stories beneath concrete and floodlights, and call it progress. But rivers are patient, and the Yarra, more than most, remembers. Beneath Federation Square, under the footfalls of tourists and trams, the river still whispers. In the gaps between the traffic lights and buskers, if you listen, not just with ears, but with something older, you can hear it. Not a sound, but a feeling. The weight of something watching, something waiting. In recent years, there's been a quiet return to the old ways, not by the city as a whole, but by those who never left them. The Wurundjeri, still here despite everything, have begun to reassert their relationship with the Birrarung. Not in loud declarations, but through ceremony, through presence, through the slow stitching back of broken lines. There was a gathering not long ago, small, humble, held on the banks near Warrandyte, where the river still runs close to how it once did. Smoke drifted skyward as elders spoke to the water, their words in language carried by the breeze. Children listened. Not all understood, but they felt it, the return of something rightful. One elder, Wurundjeri, spoke of the guardian, not as a monster, not even as a threat, but as a reminder spirit. She described seeing it once as a girl on a cold morning after her uncle passed. "It came to show us the river was grieving too," she said. "It comes in grief, in warning, in balance." Her words spread quietly. A few were mocked, but more were remembered. Whispers passed down again, not as cautionary tales but as living truths. The Yarra-Yarra wasn't a beast. It was a voice. And that voice doesn't always need words. In the city, in the busiest parts of the river's path, odd things still happen. Lights that flicker by the water. Pets that refuse to drink from certain spots. Fishermen who swear their lines are pulled not by fish, but by something deeper, heavier. They don't talk about it much, not out loud. But in pubs, in late-night conversations, the stories surface. A tram driver, long retired, once told of a shape he saw gliding just under the surface as he crossed the bridge near Flinders Street. "Too big to be real," he said, voice thick with memory. "It moved like it knew it wasn't supposed to be seen, but it let me see it anyway. Like it wanted me to remember." Even the urban designers, those tasked with remaking the riverbanks for tourism and commerce, have their own accounts. One woman, working late on landscaping plans, left her sketches by the window. The next morning, they were wet, not from rain, but from water, river water. Her window had been closed, no footprints, no explanation. She never went back to that site. It's tempting, always, to dismiss such tales. The rational mind recoils, reaching for comfort. But the outback doesn't work like that. And the edge of the outback, where bush meets city, where memory meets asphalt, works even less. Because in those places, the world is thinner. The surface stretches tight like old skin, and what's beneath remembers. The Yarra-Yarra is not a thing to be solved. It's not a puzzle. It's not even a creature, not really. It's a presence, a consciousness wrapped in water and time. A being that doesn't seek to be understood, only to be felt. And those who feel it, never forget. You can mark the time in this city by concrete and glass, but the river marks time differently. Not in minutes or years, but in cycles, in floods and droughts, in the quiet pulse of reeds brushing one another in the dusk breeze. It knows when the balance tips. It always has. The ones who feel the river in their bones, the old wanderers, the night shift cleaners, the joggers who run alone at 4 a.m., they speak of moods. Of shifts in the air that have nothing to do with weather. The river can be calm for months, even years. Then something turns, and it broods. It thickens. The mist clings longer. The birds go quiet. In 2006, a biologist working on water quality near Dights Falls collected a sample that shimmered strangely. It wasn't oil nor algae. None of the usual suspects. She stored the vial, made a note, moved on. Weeks later, she returned to the same site. The equipment she'd left secured was torn apart. Nothing stolen, just disturbed. The only thing out of place was a series of markings in the mud, long, sweeping arcs, too deliberate for current, too wide for any known animal. She didn't return again. That same year, a pair of amateur kayakers vanished upstream of Kew. Their boats were found days later, perfectly intact, floating in a still eddy. No sign of struggle, no damage, just absence. The newspapers ran the usual theories: foul play, misadventure, a run-in with submerged debris. But one officer, speaking off the record, noted the strangest detail. Both life jackets were still on board, unworn and zipped up. Locals say the Yarra swallows what doesn't belong, but it also gives back sometimes. In 2011, a weathered carving was found wedged in the rocks near Fairfield Boathouse. A piece of red gum, shaped like a serpent, stained and smoothed by years of submersion. Experts dated it at over a century old. Wurundjeri elders examined it silently, then wrapped it in cloth and took it away. They wouldn't say where it came from or where it went. The river had returned something. That was enough. Yet not all signs are physical. Some are felt. The dreams, for instance, those have increased. People living along the river report strange sleep, recurring visions of water rising, of dark eyes beneath their floorboards, of something vast moving just beyond perception. A psychologist working in Collingwood collected over a dozen such cases within a year. He dismissed them, officially, as shared anxiety. Privately, he admitted they felt orchestrated. And in every dream, the river never spoke. It watched. Then there's the sound. Only heard between midnight and 3 a.m., they say. A low, rhythmic thrum that doesn't come from boats or machinery. It pulses just beneath hearing, felt more than heard. Some liken it to a heartbeat. Others say it's like breathing, long, slow, submerged. Those who've stood by the water when it happens say the air turns heavy, like the river is leaning in to listen. That's the real terror, isn't it? Not being watched, but being understood. Being known by something old enough to remember your ancestors, and quiet enough to never say what it sees. Because that's what the Yarra-Yarra is. It's the memory of the river, shaped into presence. A custodian of silence, of consequence. And perhaps the reason it stirs more often now is because we've stopped listening. There's a strange thing that happens when a city forgets its river. It doesn't just lose the sound of water or the scent of silt after rain. It loses rhythm, the slow, tidal memory of the land, the kind of knowing that only water can hold. Melbourne prides itself on motion, on speed, culture, brightness. But the river beneath it moves to a different tempo, older, wiser, and increasingly agitated. In 2014, a team of university researchers installed underwater microphones in various stretches of the Yarra, hoping to catalog native aquatic life through sound. What they found unsettled them. Among the expected recordings, muffled currents, distant boat engines, the occasional thrum of fish movement, there were anomalies, deep tonal pulses, incredibly low frequency, sustained longer than any known biological call, too structured to be coincidence, too organic to be mechanical. They scrubbed the audio, tested it against libraries of natural and industrial sounds. Nothing matched. The recordings were archived quietly. Funding was not renewed. But the technician who handled the files reported something peculiar. After days of listening, she began dreaming of water. Every night, the same image, a vast dark shape rising beneath her, slow and deliberate, never fully seen. That's how it often comes. Not in spectacle, but in saturation. The river seeps into people. It changes them. In a riverside pub in Hawthorne, a bartender keeps a journal behind the counter, not of drink orders or customer tabs, but of what regulars say when they're deep into their cups. It started as a joke, but the entries grew stranger. Saw the black shine again tonight. River's breathing funny. Something's waiting down there. She doesn't laugh about it anymore. Even the animals seem to know. Dogs stop short at the river's edge, tails stiff, growling low at nothing. Cats sit and stare out windows with unnatural stillness when the Yarra fog's over. Birds, particularly cormorants, the old fish hunters, have been seen circling the same stretch of river for hours, calling, then vanishing all at once. In 2019, an artist mounted an installation under Prince's Bridge, a series of light sculptures activated by motion sensors. For 2 weeks, the lights would flicker and hum at random hours of the night, always between 2 and 4 a.m., even when no one was recorded passing. She moved the sensors, changed the code. Nothing changed. The system pulsed to its own rhythm, synced with the unseen. When asked about it in a gallery talk, she simply said, "I think the river wanted to be seen. But it's not visibility the Yarra-Yarra craves. It's reverence, or at the very least, recognition. For centuries it was treated as sacred. Then it was diverted, dredged, poisoned, and still it flowed. Still it held stories. But now the pressure builds. Something old, long dormant, is flexing again beneath the skin of the city. And Melbourne doesn't know how to listen anymore. So it dreams. Dreams of eyes in the mist. Of ripples with no source. Of water rising through floorboards and whispering truths it has no mouth to speak. Because the river remembers everything. It remembers the shape of the land before streets had names. It remembers the hands that blessed it and the boots that scarred it. It remembers the first sighting, the first blood, the first stone thrown in contempt. And it remembers how silence can roar when the time is right. Some places hum with memory, others brood. The Yarra, in its quietest moments, feels like it's holding its breath. Not in peace, but in preparation, as if waiting for a signal or an apology. There are places along the river where time folds. You know them when you find them. Corners where the light feels wrong, where sound dulls, where the city recedes. Eltham, Warrandyte, bits of Kew, those bends in the river where the bush still whispers. Stand there at dusk, and the air thickens. The birds quiet, the trees lean in, and the water watches. It was near such a bend that a man named Graham spotted it. He was camping with his daughter, taking one last trip before she moved interstate. No tents, just swags and an old kettle blackened from years of fire. They hadn't even talked about the Yarra-Yarra, not yet. But that night something woke them. No sound, no movement, just a stillness that pressed against the skin like cold breath. His daughter stirred, eyes wide, whispering, "Did you hear that?" He hadn't, but he felt it, a low, vibrating presence that made his chest feel too small. Then, from the bend upstream, the water parted, barely. A slow ripple, the kind that shouldn't happen unless something big shifts below. He didn't see it, not really. Just the curve of something too long for logic, disappearing into the deeper dark. He didn't tell his daughter, just packed up at first light and drove in silence. Only spoke of it months later, when she brought up her own dream, one she'd had that same night. She dreamt of being beneath the river, of opening her eyes and finding another set staring back. They both stopped speaking after that. The Yarra-Yarra doesn't need spectacle to haunt. Its presence is more intimate than that. It meets you in your doubts, in the parts of your mind that still believe in consequences older than law. It reminds you that forgetting is never free. There's a reason some Wurundjeri elders refuse to step in certain parts of the river now. Not because they fear the creature, but because they respect it. They know balance can't be feigned. You don't go to the Yarra-Yarra with disrespect in your heart. It won't strike you down. It'll simply show you yourself. Not as you wish to be, but as the river sees you. And that's often far worse. Stories like Graham's aren't rare. They're just unspoken. A shadow passed in a fishing memory. A detour taken without reason. A moment by the bank where everything inside you knows not to go further. It's not about proof. It's about knowing. Because that's what this has always been about. Not belief, not science, but recognition. You don't need to believe in the Yarra-Yarra for it to be real. You just need to feel it. And sooner or later, if you spend enough time near the river, you will. It won't roar. It won't flash scales or teeth. It'll rise inside you like a story long buried. And when it does, the city around you will blur. And for a breath, you'll remember that this was never your river to begin with. There's a bridge near Abbotsford, old and overlooked, where the ironwork sweats rust into the river below. It creaks in the wind, not loudly, but enough to suggest memory. Walk across it at night, and the city's brightness feels a world away. The lamplight thins, the air thickens. Beneath your feet, the Yarra churns in slow, deliberate spirals. It was here, in the winter of 2003, that a group of graffiti artists claimed to see something moving in the water. They were working fast, illegally, leaving paint on pylons where the tide could almost reach. One of them, young, unsteady, lost his grip and fell. The others froze, expecting a splash. But what they heard instead was silence. A few heartbeats later, he surfaced, gasping, wild-eyed, clawing at the bank. Not for air, for escape. He wouldn't speak at first, only shook. It was days before he found language again. And even then, all he could say was, "It was looking at me. Not like an animal, like it knew who I was." They never returned to that bridge, left their work unfinished. And the tag they left behind, just a name in trembling lines, was scrubbed off by council crews within the week. But the rust stains returned, darker than before, bleeding down like old wounds reopened. Stories like this don't make headlines. They exist in the margins, passed from mouth to ear in places where light doesn't reach. Builders who refuse to work past dusk on riverside projects. Elderly couples who leave their porches lit all night facing the water. Cyclists who feel hands, not wind, not branches, but hands brushing their backs as they pass under low-hanging trees. And beneath all of it, a quiet truth builds. The Yarra-Yarra isn't just a tale. It's a presence, a guardian perhaps, or something far older than that. Not a monster in the Western sense, bloodthirsty, bestial, but a being of consequence, something born of deep time, not of our making, and certainly not within our control. The Wurundjeri have always known this. Their stories were never just allegories. They were warnings, lessons wrapped in spirit and song. They tell of beings who walk between worlds, who shift form, who answer only to the rhythms of the land. Some appear as flame, others as wind. This one, manifests in water, always water, and only when it must. There's no rule to when it shows, no ritual that guarantees safety. But there is a pattern. Disrespect the river, and something comes to remind you. Carve into its banks, poison its flow, treat it as nothing but a channel, and it stirs. And when it stirs, the air goes still. Even the most skeptical, the most grounded, speak softer by the Yarra after sundown. Police officers on patrol lower their radios. Joggers shorten their stride. There's a hush not imposed but suggested, not fear, reverence. As if the river has leaned in close to listen, and no one wants to be heard saying the wrong thing. Because deep down, something in us remembers. Not the city-bred logic of laws and ledgers, but the old knowing. The kind that lives in bone and blood. The kind that recognizes a spirit when it brushes past. And the Yarra-Yarra. It brushes past often. Sometimes softly, like a sigh beneath the water. Other times like a gust of cold where no wind should be. Always reminding, always present, always watching. They built festivals on the banks, fireworks, parades, dancers in feathers and neon. The Moomba procession floats past each year like a dream of forgetting, color and music washing over the river's surface, pretending it's all celebration and none of it consequence. But underneath, the Yarra watches. It doesn't judge. It remembers. There was a year, no one agrees exactly when the river rose just after the festival ended. The sun was out, skies clear, no warning in the forecasts. But the water surged inland, not violently, just enough to cover the lowest walking paths to leave offerings behind. Twisted reeds, bone-white branches, and once, a carved stone, etched with spiral marks no one could translate. Council cleared it away within hours. But some remember. One of the street sweepers quit that day, walked off the job mid-shift, never explained why. The truth is, Melbourne is built on forgetting. Streets with names that erase what stood there before. Statues to men who drained swamps and felled gums as if silence were progress. But the river never forgets. It runs like a scar through the heart of the city, too old to protest, too powerful to be ignored forever. And now, in the age of data and surveillance, of glass towers and precision-timed trains, people are beginning to feel it again, not through proof, but through unease. CCTV cameras facing the river blink out, security feeds corrupt. One sequence from South Bank shows the reflection of a bridge, solid, familiar, but no vehicles above, no movement, just ripples, as if the river decided to reflect something else entirely. The technician flagged the footage. The file was lost. Then there was the boy who ran from his school group during an excursion. They found him kneeling by the edge near Birrarung Mar, eyes closed, whispering in a language no one recognized. He didn't speak for 3 days after that. When he finally did, he asked only one thing. Is it gone now? He never said what it was. The Yarra-Yarra doesn't need to be seen to be felt. In fact, it prefers the in-between. Mist, dusk, fog. Times when things are neither here nor there. Threshold moments. Because that's what it is, a threshold, a liminal body, a place between worlds. And in those moments, when the river's surface glazes over like black glass and the hum of the city fades just enough for the wind to take hold, the stories breathe again. You don't hear them with ears. You feel them in your ribs, in the tension that makes you step back from the edge for no reason you can name. And if you don't, well, that's when it comes. Not to punish, not to destroy, just to remind. It might show itself as a shape in the fog, a slow wave moving upstream against the flow. A pair of eyes that vanish when you look again. Or perhaps nothing at all, just the knowledge that you've been seen. It never roars. It never runs. It's too old for haste, too certain of its place. You can cross every bridge in Melbourne and still feel it at your heels, because the Yarra-Yarra isn't behind you. It's beneath, waiting. And so the river flows, still, relentless, not hurried, not loud, but with a certainty that the streets above will never match. The Yarra moves like memory, like breath beneath sleep. Beneath bridges, beneath boardwalks, beneath the weight of a city that pretends it's forgotten. But forgetting is a privilege. The river doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. Each ripple is a footstep of the old world. Each current a whisper from the time before. Long before towers rose or maps were drawn. Before names like Melbourne or Australia ever existed, the Birrarung carved its way through basalt and silence. It was not a boundary then. It was a spine. A path for people, for stories, for spirits. Now its banks are lined with lights and laughter, canoes replaced by kayaks, fire by LED. But the spirit in the water, that has never changed. Maybe that's the greatest myth of all, that we could change the river without changing ourselves. The Yarra-Yarra is not a monster. It is not evil, not violent. It is something far more dangerous to forget. A mirror. It shows us what happens when we sever ourselves from land, from rhythm, from consequence. It rises in stories, yes, but also in the subtle things, the misplaced shadow in your peripheral, the stillness before dawn, the scent of wet earth that doesn't belong in a city, the dream that lingers after waking of water above and below, and something massive watching without malice. Just watching. For those who've seen it, truly seen it, there is no return. Not because it harms, but because it awakens. It leaves you with questions that can't be Googled, with memories you never lived, with a sense of being part of something that will outlive you. And for Melbourne, perhaps that's what the Yarra-Yarra truly is. Not a beast, but a reckoning. A force that cannot be paved over or priced. A living memory, one that surfaces when the city becomes too loud, too careless, too proud. So next time you walk by the river, late alone when the fog clings low and the footpath seems quieter than usual, pause. Look down into the water. Wait. And if the surface stirs, if you feel that subtle shift in air, don't run. Don't speak. Just remember. Because some rivers don't forget, and some things beneath them are still listening.